How was the film received in Karlovy Vary, but also afterwards, like on its festival life?
No, it was well received. It's you can see it's more like festival film. It's not like really the film that people are going to see in the cinemas. It's not the big turnaround for that. But since the festival life it has been good, and especially in Karlovy Vary, we were very happy because one of the goals. One of the main goals, actually, why we made this film was to bring out this notion about that such cinema existed, and we were happy that Karlovy Vary also made a retrospective of these works. So actually, the three of the masters that are still alive, they could come and they could like relive again. They had halls full of people and they were doing the Q&As and answering the questions. It was really nice for us to somehow bring this notion about it to the wider world, because these films were created during Soviet time when the borders were closed and practically nothing of that has been seen outside the Soviet Union.
And how much there is awareness about this Baltic New Wave in Latvia itself or in the Baltic region? Is it something that people are aware of, or how did it come about? We have heard about the French New Wave, but the Baltic New Wave is a term that we first hear about.
There is actually no such term. We invented it in order to create this wave. You know, these people, they were not pioneers of so-called poetic cinema. We consider Dziga Vertov in the 20s to be the how to say, initiator or inventor of it. But anyway, it was different because these films were created in the 60s when there was so-called the Khrushchev's thaw, after Stalin's time, when things got a little bit easier. The ice broke at least a little bit, so they could start to put in the films things that were not possible before. And anyway, we consider it a wave. At least for us, it was like that. The young people who started to make different cinema, different meaning that they were not doing Soviet propaganda films that were actually called documentaries at that time. Newsreels, you always had to praise the communistic party and the best workers in the kolkhoz and fabrics and plants, and there comes this bunch of young guys who are starting to make films about eternal things that you cannot put your finger on, you cannot censor it, you cannot say this is forbidden, because that is you can actually not do it. You just have to let it go.
Yeah, that's actually quite interesting that you mentioned, because all these films actually were made during Soviet time, and they were made by public money, and they still managed to convince the authorities and the artistic committees and all the censorship committees that these films should be made. Maybe you can tell us the story, because we've seen 10 Minutes Older, and it's a really interesting and one of the most emblematic films of this, if we could call it a movement. What was the story behind? I think that there was a story how Herz Frank actually convinced this artistic committee of why should he make the film, or why he should get the money to make it.
There is actually, this is the tricky part, and I think the filmmakers today also knows how to do it. There is here the whole script written about how we should teach the children the good and the bad things, and the fairy tale is a very good way to do it, and this is written in our communistic constitution that we should do this educational work. So the very big scenario was made, and at the end there was this film, but later the officials, they couldn't say that this is not about good and bad or evil. It is, and it's a Soviet boy who is sitting there. So there is practically no possibility to censor it, and it's made without any cut. So you cannot put it in or put out something. And this Lithuanian Roberta Sverba that you saw with the beard, who was drinking this, he made this about old people. He made a film called The Dreams of Centenarians, that people who were 100 years old, and he sold it to the film studio by saying that he's going to make a film about people who were born in the same year as Lenin. Maybe you remember who is Lenin. So this is the way also how they did. And you cannot say that it's not about people who were born in the same year. It is.
That makes it actually really interesting, because they were not dissidents, and in the same time they managed to make these films that are really timeless films about topics that are equally to all people. It doesn't matter whether this child is Latvian or Lithuanian or Macedonian or wherever it comes from. When we're in here, like, I wanted to ask you more about if you could tell us some more about this ontology of this poetic documentary film. What would be these key principles, and what does it make it so unique or so different than any other movement in cinema history, and what does it make it what it is? Could you put a few notions of what is special about the poetic documentary cinema?
Well, so as they say themselves, they put the human in the center, because I don't know how it was in Yugoslavia, but in Soviet cinema, the people, the human, was not important. The important thing was movement, collective, party, building, to march, progress, all these things. But the man, the human, the woman, the soul, it was not important. It was just a mechanism to make all this machine go. And this is they did the opposite. They concentrated. They put a focus on this, on the human, on the emotions, on the soul, and such things were not discussed usually. What is soul? But in 10 Minutes Older, he has actually managed to film the soul of human soul, and this is one thing. Other thing was really, really great emphasis on visual language, like. That was the groundbreaking, because that was way ahead more if we compare with Dziga Vertova and stuff. It was like really very special visual language, and very important thing was the symbols and metaphors. As it was no free speech and no possibility to speak about actualities, this is what they call, they went into the vertical, because towards the space you cannot put any boundaries, but always they're trying to put into the frame things that audience by watching can read themselves. And somebody will read this symbol, somebody not, but it's a possibility. And that plays very well out also in the several generations after. You can see nowadays young people who are watching them, they maybe see something different in those symbols than that filmmakers put them in, but still they read it. So these are the main things, to speak without words, which is actually the true language of cinema. And if you're taking off this, tongue, then you really focus on the what image can tell. This is, I think, Ingmar Bergman said that when the sound came to cinema, it totally changed the direction of the cinema language, which was developing in a certain way, and then it was stopped by the sound coming in. So this is. The main thing, and actually such kind of films where audience were required to think with things that happening on the screen. It was really extremely healthy for our people, because when they came back from this cinema or theater or whatever poetry readings, they became back rich, and they understood that it's not that everything is finished and there is no hope. That there are, they find their like-minded people who are also thinking with, and that's really, really healthy, this thinking for the brains. And actually, when you now so much media and so much information is coming in, you're becoming blind if you're not served on the spoon. These things, you're not required to think so much. Of course, there's still great cinema who does the opposite.
And it's interesting, I would say one of the characteristics probably of the poetic documentary cinema, it's, as you said, it's much more image-centered than narrative-centered. And what we see really little in these films is text. It's almost no text, no narrative or voiceover. It's either none or very little. And the topics that they really cover are just these universal topics that remind us on this idea of Dziga Vertov, of this pure cinematic language, that it's not a sum of the different arts, and you add music, you add dialogue, and you get cinema, but just the image itself can really speak. This brings me to another question that I had for you. What do you think, in a world of today, which is much faster and perception works differently, we as spectators just are surrounded by so many different works of art that just bombard us with louder, noisier, and just images, more colors and everything. Do you think that it's possible to create this kind of films today? And are there people, whether it's in Latvia, young filmmakers maybe, that continue on the steps of these filmmakers to carry on this poetic documentary filmmaking today?
Nowadays it's much more difficult, because there are certain requirements. In order to produce the film, it's not 2-3 people anymore. There are a lot more, and they also producers very often push you towards things that you can sell better. But as you see, my colleague Otris is one of the very few very high-class European filmmaker who still does this. He doesn't care, he's walking his path and doesn't care. And there is always some audience, maybe not very big, but there is always some audience. You have to, you cannot always go with the flow. You have to resist if you think that it's giving anything. And regarding the young filmmakers, it's maybe some forms are different, but these films have really left a path, or the root has been deep. This Baltic art, not only art, also literature and cinema has something, has this meditative or poetic approach. And I very often, because I've been involved in new media art also, and even in the most technological gadget-based exhibition, which is a big exhibition. If you walk in São Paulo or somewhere, you will pick out those Baltic works, because there is some poetry about it, even if they are very technological. I think so, I don't know.
Maybe we can open the podium in here if someone has a question. Ако некој има прашање или сака да се вклучи, не знам, со своја импресија за филмот, еве може.
The original score is composed by a Lithuanian composer, Giedrius Puskunigis, and but there's also from the old films there are original scores, and he's really I think, I don't know, so carefully been taken care of, also weaving in this music from the old films into this. And choirs, actually, it's the best soprano in Lithuania, and the group, and it's also only coming at the end, at the end sequence. You cannot hear it before. But it's and we are very happy about this music and the work of this young composer. No, thank you.
Do some nostalgia about the old times in the movie, like we have here in Macedonia, more or less our generation is a little nostalgic about the Yugoslavian times. Is the same thing in Latvia or not really?
Not really about those times, I would say. Of course, there's people who also feel nostalgic, but no, we were mostly very happy about our independence. But this nostalgia is maybe about something else. This is also one of the reasons why we made this film, because suddenly understanding that these filmmakers are getting very old, and sooner or later they will leave us, and this is this. But it's light, nostalgic. It is natural, and they are with it, and it's in a way it's natural way. But this we feel nostalgic about time. Also, the characters who remember, who just bring out this beauty of documentary, because this is preserved. Everything is preserved, and youth and atmosphere and different houses. So. There is this slight nostalgia and melancholy, but maybe not about the regime, but about the times that are changing.
Or about time, as such. Никој друг? Дали може би сака да се вклучи? Може и да преведеме. Може дури и дел од дискусијата, ако не можете да следите, само да споделите ако сакате некоја импресија од филмот ваш. Може и со превод. Вие можете да кажете на македонски, јас ќе преведа. Да. I'm going to translate it to you. He's going to say it in Macedonian.
Секав од таму, али добро. И честитам на авторите, предпоставувам режисерија, госпожата.
I want to congratulate the authors.
Беше толку едноставно за прав документарец, дури би рекол сурово реално беше приказано.
It was so simple for a documentary, and in a way I would say it was really raw and raw, real in a raw way, just how the story was depicted.
И пораките во главном ги разбравме, што е најважно во презентацијата. Меѓутоа, најсилен впечаток ми остави прикажувањето на децата и посебно на еден од нив, од малечките, кој беше вклучен живо во пратењето, предпоставувам, на филм. Меѓутоа, куклина представа. Меѓутоа, во еден момент, односно во неколку моменти, беше толку ужаснат од представата, толку уплашен, што јас лично го доживував сирово и соучествував, односно сочувствував со него.
So his strongest impression was seeing these children like on the screen, like the two Mopeds Frank, and how they're watching this puppet show, and especially this one little child when at one moment he's completely stunned and shocked by something that is he seeing, and how he felt himself empathizing with him and just feeling the emotions on the face of the child.
Јас лично мислев дека е приказ на некаков си филм и помислив дали снимателот, односно режисерот, побарал одредена дозвола од родителите да гледаат такви филмови децата.
I thought that
кај што се шокирани, јас би рекол.
And I was wondering whether the director asked the parents or somehow for the children to participate in such a project and just see this kind of a show or
Околу тоа поединости, ако може нешто да ни каже.
If you could say something about it, about the
Thank you.
Yeah. About 10 minutes older.
Да,
Yes, there was this that idea was cooking for 4 years. Hertz Frank had this idea to film the emotions of the kids when they were watching, but they didn't know how, because in that time cameras, the film was not. You have to have light. It's because they are nowadays cameras can catch also in the darkness, but at that time could not, and they couldn't figure out how to do it. So.
Значи 4 години Херц Франк размислува за овој филм, но е потребно било толку долго време за да изнајде начин како да го направи, бидејќи филмот е во потпуна темнина и требало да се најде начин како и технички да се изведе за да може да се фатат сите овие нијанси на лицето на детето.
So they 4 years later, this cameraman Yuri Spodnieks, who later became like very great director himself, he catch Hertz Frank in a film studio on the corridor and said, "I know how to do it."
4 години подоцна кинематограферот на филмот го наоѓа во Рига студиото Херц Франк и го фаќа за раката и му вели: "Херц Франк, знам јас како да го направиме ова."
They had built a special lighting system with the small holes, and during the performance, first it was very dark. Then gradually comes little bit later.
Изградиле систем на светилки кои што стојат тука пред децата и кои што пополека се приклучуваат и почнуваат да ги осветлуваат лицата на децата.
And they were looking for a very, how to say, emotional kid. The parents knew, but of course, kid didn't knew anything. And they picked a special. They watched all these children's performances to pick out the one which was like really in that period of time. Because 10 minutes is because the film roll time of the film roll was only 10 minutes.
Значи барале дете кое што ќе има оваа можност емотивно да се изрази. Родителите биле консултирани, а инаку 10 минути трае филмот, бидејќи толку една филмска ролна и заради тоа и 10 минути трае.
And 20 years later, Hertz Frank was shooting the same boy. They kept contact. There's a film Flashback, and it starts with that. And the boy has become his face totally motionless. He's become bridge player. And in bridge, you cannot show any emotions in order that they don't see the other.
20 години подоцна, Херц Франк се обидува да го најде ова момче, кој што веќе е возрасен човек, и сега неговото лице е тотално не изменето, ама и не изразува емоции, бидејќи он е играч на бридж, професионален, и тоа е едно од работите кои што треба да ги имате за да можете да го правите тоа.
Yes, and about that film, that this 10 minutes older, when it was made, the film studio accepted it because it didn't cost anything. It cost very little. The commission man said, maybe it's too long because there is no text. Can you cut it shorter? He said, I cannot cut because there is no cuts in it. Okay, it's anyway very cheap, let it live. And then everybody forgot about it. And 20 years or 28 years later, it was picked in Leipzig Festival as a new tendencies, like in the section new tendencies. This film started to live again.
Значи филмот бил направен многу ефтино и во тоа време кога потоа авторитетите, институциите го гледаат, велат окей, нема текст во филмот, 10 минути можеби е предолг, можеби треба да го скратиме. А Херц Франк им вели ова е само еден кадар, нема што да се крати. и она што му велат од другата страна е, окей, тогаш да го ставиме, нека живее без тоа, беше ефтин филмот, едноставно филмот се заборава, некаде е трнат настрана и дури потоа, how many years later you sat in Leipzig? 28 години подоцна на филмскиот фестивал во Лајпциг и тоа во таа програма Нови тенденции, всушност филмот се преоткрива и го отпочнува својот втор живот.
And nowadays, it's in many film schools. It is shown as example of brilliant filmmaking.
А денеска во многу филмски школи се прикажува како пример за една маестрална режија и начин на креирање на документарен филм. Дали можеби некој друг има коментар или прашање? Ако не, јас сакам, I would like to close it by asking you one last question. From this film and all of this archival work that you have done by digging out and just showing us these authors that we didn't know about, probably it took a life on its own, because we were talking, there is this book from Herz Frank that maybe it will get translated. These films are not yet accessible much outside of Latvia. So what do you plan to do with this project, next? And what are you working on personally as your next film project?
No, yes, we had very long research process for this film, so we gathered a lot of information and actually a lot of material also with the writings and interviews and photos, and so we are actually planning to go on and to make such a book. And actually Anna had the idea today that we should make an anthology of these old films, and the good thing is that they are being restored now, so they are in good quality, and part of them are on the internet available, but because of the different rights, not from every point in the world they can be watched. So that would be an idea to make it more compact.
Дел од овие филмови ќе моментално се работи на тоа да се реставрира, дел се и пристапни може да се погледнат и на интернет, а можеби ќе се изработи некоја антологија каде што луѓето во една целина ќе можат да ги погледнат. I just wanted, сакав само да го споменем, има уште еден филм од овој Балтички нов бран, кој што е на Удис Браунс, еден од ликовите кои што ги видовме во филмот, и се нарекува 235 милиони, што алудира на бројот на жители во тогашна Советска Русија. Има голем број на тимови кои што Удис Браунс ги собира, тоа се режисери и камермани кои што одат во различни делови на Советска Русија и го снимаат животот на луѓето со сите оние обични и необични работи. I just wanted to mention this film by Udis Browns, like the 235 million. Could you tell us maybe just about the basic inspiration? How did that film come about? It's like an epic film in the scale, how it was done with all these different teams that were sent out throughout the Soviet Union to pick up these images of people and their everyday life.
That just shows how in the big scale they were thinking. This one of the impulses for that film was very famous exhibition which was curated by Edward Steichen, but you say Steichen? Steichen. It was very famous photo exhibition called Family of Man. And it was traveling the world actually in the 50s, and now it's in UNESCO Heritage in Luxembourg, actually, as one of the world's preservable heritages. And in that exhibition, there was like really these humans showed from very artistic and interesting way, starting from also from birth and how the family life is going on and how people are living. And it was at some point, it was also visiting Moscow where these guys were studying in a film institute. So that was one inspiration. But another one is the Udis Browns was attending public sauna. Also another topic we took today. because after the war, it was not like every house had their showers or bathtub, so people were going to public sauna to wash, and then he saw a naked man, and he had 2 tattoos on the breast. And one was Lenin, another was Stalin, and in the middle was Mount Ararat, like really tattoo painting. So he had this idea that he should go and film this Mount Ararat, which is, also very biblical thing because of this ship of Noah and so. And then just it turned out, why only in Mount Ararat? We should take whole Soviet Union, and this. And there was for whole year, 4 teams of filmmakers were traveling. At that time was no internet, no mobile phones, nothing. They were traveling to the whole, really the whole Soviet Union, and they were with a little manual from the Edward Stegen's exhibition, because the 4 cameramen, they should know how to shoot. And visiting everything from deserts to volcanoes, and oldest people and youngest and births, and also this military line was there going through. Extremely big production, which was without knowledge of the filmmakers. It was shown as opening film also in the same Leipzig festival. But this Soviet official delegation was there, and after the screening, Uldis Brauns was called to Moscow, and they say we have to do something, because high officials from this Deutsche Democratic Republic, in the middle of the film, they stand up and they went out and they never returned. So we have to shorten it down. So they shortened it like twice. There are 3 versions. The short one, which is like 70 minutes, then the longer one, which is 108 minutes. And now, after the death of Uldis Brauns, we have found the director's cut, which is 1.5 hours, and which we have not seen, and which we will see soon.
Овој филм е инспириран од она изложба на Едвард Штајшен, можеби некоја знае, која се нарекува Семејството на човекот, моментално е заштитена од ЮНЕСКО и се наоѓа во Луксембург. Инаку изложба која што го прикажува човекот од неговото раѓање па до смртта, ни сите овие стадиуми на животот и сето она што е најбазично човечко. И токму Uldis Brauns во овој филм 235 милиони е инспириран од овој филм и праќаат 4 тимови на камермани, кои што одат со едно мало упатство од оваа изложба на Едвард Штајшен, на кој начин би снимале или што треба да фатат, и буквално низ цела Советска Унија, од вулкани до планини, до млади луѓе, постари, свадби, погреби, даваат еден пресек на она каков е животот тогаш. Доколку имате можност, пронајдете го филмот. I would like here to thank you, Kristina, for taking the time and for being here with us for these 2 days. And just one thing that Hertz like nicely put it, he said like these films helped audiences to learn to see, not only to watch, but to see. And I really think that this is what this poetic documentary filmmaking can bring about. And I really hope that we will see the map of Ptolemy and all these books as maybe an anthology, or just have a chance to see them again. Thank you a lot.
Thank you.